the Ashland Planning Commission study session for September 23rd. Are there any announcements?
Yeah, I can announce both for the commission and some people that might be watching at home, some upcoming community events. The Ashland Wildfire Emergency Drill is scheduled for October 11th, and if people are interested in participating in the first of its kind designed to help us all practice what to do in the event of a wildfire, I direct them to the city's webpage to sign up in order to receive notifications and register before September 30th. Again, it's a news item on the city's webpage at ashland.or.us. Additionally, the Parks is having a public meeting regarding Hunter Park tennis court restoration tomorrow at 5:30 in the Ashland Senior Center. And lastly, the October scheduled coffee and conversation with City Council and staff is scheduled for October 14th from 1 to 2:30 at North Mountain Park. For the Planning Commission's upcoming meeting, we are anticipating for your October regular meeting, October 14th, that we will be having a site review for multifamily development at 300 Clay Street. So something to look forward to. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. So our discussion item is with Jordan and talking about special event permits. Yes, sorry, Ross.
That's okay. Thanks, Chair or Vice Chair
Whatever,
Kinkarian.
yeah.
Hey, real quick, for the record, while I operate a company that supports events, my situation is the same as others in the community that may apply for a special use permit. And under state ethics rules, this is a class interest. Further, I have no direct financial interest in the ordinances that will be discussed tonight, and therefore no conflict in reviewing it.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
I second that too. Thank you.
Second it
Russell.
for Russ or for yourself?
No, for myself. I also participate in some special event permits, but have no financial stake in them.
Thank you both. Okay.
Thank you, and good evening, Planning Commission. I saw y'all about a month ago to just propose the idea of changing our code to help more easily support special events. So I'm coming back to you all tonight with now the details of what those code changes will look like. I have a quick PowerPoint presentation just to do the high-level overview. In your packets is the currently drafted language. They're still getting feedback, and I'll have some specific feedback requests for you all tonight. All right. So as a quick reminder, currently we have 11 different short-term permits across 6 different departments, and they're referenced in 3 different locations in the code, including Title 18 land use. So my goal is to streamline all of this into one code section, one application, and one review process for all our different types of permits, and my one ring to rule them all plan. So the code changes required for this is I would like to establish a brand new section of code, Chapter 2.69, Special Event. This is how it's set up in most other cities. And then modify existing chapters that currently reference short-term permits or define short-term permits and reference them to that new chapter. So to kind of just go into some specifics, this chart before you all in the blue column is what our current policy is within the code, our proposed policy that I put forward in the draft language, and the reason why behind those changes. These are the major changes. Exact wording, once again, can be found in the packet. But I wanted to highlight them just so that you're aware, since it would be removing certain short-term permits from land use and putting them under administration. Currently, the process we use for special events was adopted by council by resolution back in 2012. Has not been changed since. So I'm shifting it so where it's referenced in code, but the actual process, forms, review steps, that's all set by management. So it doesn't have to go in front of council for changes. This is for flexibility and timeliness as we improve processes as we learn. Currently, there's no appeal process, so if the city denies a permit, there's no recourse an organizer can take. This would introduce an appeal process. Right now, there's different types of permits for different types of properties and different sections of code. This puts them all in one location. Something that we'll talk about a little bit more in detail is we currently have varied restrictions on how often certain types of events occur. This is looking to do some more standardization across the board. Currently, there's a rush fee, so if you turn in an application late, you can pay extra to have it speed read. This would remove that rush fee and just have a separate appeal process if you get it before with less than 90 days submission. Currently, the sidewalk sales is a big ask by the chamber. There's a very specific date that the sidewalk sale downtown can occur. This will provide a little more flexibility as we are finding those dates are very, very hot now, that the weather has started changing. And then we are also looking to codify First Friday. Currently, there's no reference or kind of rules to the code of it, and this just helps establish it as an official event in the city. Yeah.
So, I don't know if this is the right time to ask you, but the 1 per month, no more than 5 per year, is what I questioned when I was reading through. And then if you think about First Friday, it's every month.
Exactly.
So where did the 1 per month, no more than 5 per year come from?
Yeah, so the 5 per year is coming from what other cities do in their code. Both Jacksonville and Central Point are set up like that, if my recall is correct. I was also trying to count out the months that First Friday occurs. Though technically in the code, what we're doing is we're exempting First Friday from special event permitting needs, as long as they're not blocking any public right of way. So but this is a discussion topic I'd love to open up with you all.
Okay.
And so I'm just gonna jump straight into that one if you guys are ready to talk about occurrence. All right, ignore those first 2 questions, we'll come back to those. The way our code currently reads is that, and this is specific to private property events, food trucks can happen once a month, our short-term food truck permit, or a one-time short-term use can occur once per year. That is the current code.
Yeah.
And so just a question for you all is there restrictions that you want to go beyond that or change? And this is all specific to private property. City property, it is currently at the city manager's discretion of if the city can support those special events.
So the 5 times per year is on private property only. I just don't, I mean, I understand that it's in 2 other cities, but I don't see why we should restrict it.
Yeah, and I'm happy not to.
Great.
I
That's what I would
think that's
do.
an easy solution. I just, before historically, sometimes we want to.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Jordan, for the presentation. I would agree with Commissioner Karen. I don't see really, if we're trying to open up events in Ashland, why we would be restricting to only 5 times a year. And then I would also ask if somebody like the farmers market in downtown on Saturday wanted to have food trucks, how would that work into this process?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and that's actually the second question I have on the list. And so if we're comfortable with the number of times per year occurrence, I'm happy to move on to those other questions.
I also want to, so why 1 time per month for private, why, so I would think so. If you let the market dictate how often you do an event, it's going to suss itself out. I mean, I know it creates more chaos.
I think, and one of the examples talking through with the community development department, Derek, one example we had was a flea market, or if someone wanted to set up a sale in their parking lot. How under an unlimited occurrence, we could approve them to have a parking lot sale every single weekend or every single day. And at what point does it become a conditional use permit rather than a?
So if it wasn't a flea market, if it was food trucks, so I'm trying to remember what we have. Are we still going to have a separate food
Yeah.
truck ordinance?
So I think the intention of this is to consolidate them into a singular ordinance, but to reflect back on the discussions when we were modifying our short-term events. Presently, the short-term events is 1 72-hour event in any calendar year. So it really was the intention that somebody wanted to have a blowout once a year annual sale in their parking lot.
Okay.
Or some kind of special event for that commercial use on that private property. This isn't the use of public right-of-ways where we have a variety of different special events. And we specifically carved out food trucks with the interest of allowing someone to have like an employee appreciation day and bring a food truck to their business to support their coworkers and even entice customers. And that was permitted not more than once per month for up to 72 hours. So again, it created a greater allowance for a short-term food truck event, which is distinguished from a temporary use that only happens once in a calendar year.
And I'm sorry, I don't already understand the answer to this, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Like if we have a food truck ordinance that's separate from this.
We do, this part of the food truck ordinance, the short-term event is in the land use code, and they're looking at removing that out of the land
Okay,
use
so
code.
there isn't a way to have a parking lot full of food trucks that's on a private piece of property and have that every weekend?
You can have it every day under a ministerial approval.
As a planning action?
As a
Okay.
planning action for food trucks on a property.
Great.
Kingston Cannabis would be an example of food trucks. That was approved through a conditional use permit, but under today's code, regardless of this, they could come in for an application to use up to 20% of their parking spaces, no more than 3, and they have to leave site in order to eliminate their wastewater
come
and that
back,
kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
But that's unchanged by this proposal. This is really related to those unique events that would happen either with regularity or just once in a while.
And the
Thank
proposal
you.
we have is the short-term food truck event permit, which is having a food truck for less than 72 hours once a month, would fall under this new administration chapter.
Got it. I just was, thank you for the clarity. I just don't want to see restrictions that will keep people from doing something that would be beneficial for everybody, that's all.
And I will say, talking with the business community, a lot of businesses right now are trying to have more events or more ways to draw folks in as they've experienced a shifting market and the type of things folks are looking for and types of visitors we have.
If I can add another complicating factor that just came to mind.
Sure.
There is a distinction in our ministerial food truck permit allowance that does not permit them in the downtown
Right.
as a short-term, but you can have them as a short-term event. So I think that this is an opportunity to clarify that if you want to have a permanent, for lack of a better term, food truck on a commercial property, currently that has to be outside of the downtown area, can't be within a residential area. But somebody could apply for a short-term event, which includes a food truck within the downtown. So that's clarity that we could get through this process to ensure that that's acceptable both to this commission and ultimately council.
Yeah. Food trucks aside, I'm for more events. With this proposed change, administration has the chance to approve or deny the permit for an event on a commercial or private property, correct? So let's say an event happens and the neighbors complain and the next one gets submitted. You guys have through this, you will have the jurisdiction and privy to say, we're not going to allow it or we're going to allow it with these certain conditions, right? The concern I would have, I want more events, but what if I moved in, what if I lived next to, let's say, a bank, and then the bank rented out their parking lot for live music every Tuesday night, and that's not what I moved, that would change the feel of the place if we don't set a certain cap on it, or unless administration's not doing their job and saying, what, we've heard pushback. So I guess we could be okay. I would be okay with going for more than 5 per year as long as administration had the right to pull those permits or not issue any more based upon that. That's my only concern.
Yeah, so I'm agree, and I think the self-regulating aspect of it is something that I would believe in, rather than take hard positions and not let potentially good things happen. And I'm all for simplification. However, I have a couple of questions for clarity's sake. Is there any distinction on events that are for profit, such as a flea market? And is there any distinction, you mentioned public and private property, but what about nonprofit property, such as the Elks parking lot, which is always begging to have things happen on it, or churches and so forth? So maybe I don't understand the code well enough, but where would those kinds of properties owned by nonprofits sit?
Yeah, we have no distinction around property owner type. The classification of properties listed in the code is going to be right-of-way. City property, we do delineate out parks-controlled city property, just because they have their own set of park rules, and then private property. So whether it's nonprofit-owned, church-owned, private property-owned, we apply the
Anything
same
that's
rules.
not public or right-of-way?
Anything that's not public or
Okay.
right-of-way.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'd even send the state through this process.
Yeah, just, I think, I was thinking about this before I came, and as we move into allowing more food trucks and thinking about events, we also have to be mindful of safety. I'm around events 365 days a year almost, and, I know these things get set up quickly and sometimes in a hurry. When food trucks come in, they have, gas cans, they have generators, they have extension cords. As these approvals are happening quickly, I think we also want to make sure that we have, potentially a representative from the fire department or something doing a walkthrough just for safety's sake. When I go down to these Monday events down at the park, I mean, my eyes are just catching things, and I'm like, we really got to be careful with how quickly we're doing some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And so one of the things that we've shifted to this year is we actually have a monthly review committee that reviews every single permit that comes across the various departments. And the fire marshal is now the direct fire representative for that, so that he is able to, A, set the restrictions, and then we have that documented publicly, so whoever is on staff for that day can pull up that event permit and say exactly what was required to make sure they're following those rules. And if they don't follow the rules, they need to fix it right then and there. If they don't fix it right then and there, we cancel all future permits.
So are we having inspections then during some of these events, especially when the food trucks are present? Okay,
We do.
fantastic, thank you.
No, but thank you for pointing that out. That is part of the whole purpose of having a documented process. Yeah. So generally, what I am hearing general feedback is we are comfortable with removing caps on number of occurrences, but something that we will be keeping an eye on, and if that becomes an issue, it's something that we could bring back before City Council if it is moved to administration code. Okay, that sounds great. Brandon, do you have any comments on that one?
Not on that, thank you.
Okay. Since we haven't started talking food trucks, I'm going to shift us first to what in my mind is the easier question, and that is food trucks in the public right-of-way. So right now, our code states that food trucks are not allowed in the public right-of-way. So I am requiring food trucks, if they're part of an event, to be on the private property. For example, at the Armory, we're requiring food trucks to be in that parking lot, which is technically a separate property, but same property owner. We do have an exception in our parks land, just due to the ban show and the nature there. But I would like to just gauge your all's direction on allowing food trucks in public right-of-way, so parked along a street, for the specific 2 special events. And how does that one feel?
Go ahead.
Dangerous as hell.
Yeah. I would think if street closure was part of the event, then it would be fine.
Yeah, in my notes I put if we have, if it's blocked off, if, we have street closures, proper safety, that kind of stuff, I think that it could be possible. But if it's just in the street, there's kids that run around food trucks, we have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, like as part of a block party, it should totally be allowed. Because the streets are closed.
So technically on block party, I just want to make sure we have that same understanding. Block party is what can occur in residential areas, and we do not allow food trucks in residential areas.
But there have been food trucks at block parties.
I would like to be
And it's great.
invited to the block parties you get to go to.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is food trucks in right of way as long as it's part of a full street closure. Is that, I'm gonna have to work with Brandon on wording on that one.
And food trucks allowed in block parties.
Yeah.
Or alley closures. You know, I know there's a lot of opportunity, and especially downtown, to close down an alley, which might not affect too many people,
Right.
and then that could work.
So that brings me to the next
The
question
club.
on the list. Food trucks downtown.
I mean, I think if a food truck is in a parking spot and it can be safely blocked off downtown, you know, in front of the Noble Fox, potentially while that road is closed for the farmer's market, I can see scenarios like that working. Sometimes when I hear you say right away, I'm thinking traffic and, you know, the food trucks blocking it. So maybe some more context on that.
As part of a road closure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar, because right now we are having 0 food trucks downtown. Food trucks are able to go at the park, 'cause that's not C1D. But this would be, for example, Driftco could have a food truck in their parking lot once a month, is an example of where I could see this being used. Okay, great, so looking down at the safety around use.
I can bring up other examples and to clarify that food trucks are allowed downtown if they obtain a conditional use permit for, which has been done in the past. Oregon Shakespeare Festival previously was granted a conditional use permit to locate the food cart on, next to the new theater. And I'm sorry, I forget the name of the new theater. Thomas, it's been that for 10 years at this point. But so in that case, a conditional use permit was allowed, or for a special event on the bricks might be another example of would it be appropriate to incorporate a food truck within a special event on private property that wasn't on the right of way. Currently, under our special event permit, you can't have food trucks within the downtown. So the only avenue is a full conditional use permit.
Not to harp on the block party thing, but why aren't they allowed in residential?
You know, I'm not familiar with where that came from. It's just clearly stated in the food truck section of code.
That shouldn't be there, because I mean, in my opinion.
That's an agreement, not sure.
I think in relation to block parties, I think through special event, we can work with
Yeah, we can
admin
cross
to
that.
incorporate that. I think the reason food trucks are not allowed in residential districts is because they're not commercial districts.
Well, they shouldn't, I don't think they should be allowed in residential districts unless they're part
Sure.
of an event.
I understand.
Okay.
And
So-
it does raise the question in my mind, which I had a follow-up to the earlier conversation, when Commissioner McCracken Jane raised the question of churches or nonprofits. It made me recognize that a number of churches are within
Yes.
residential districts. So to the degree that a special event could be permitted in a residential district, it brings to my mind the issue of number of events per year, because if your neighbor in a residential district used their property for weddings every weekend, that might be a special event that became impactful to the surrounding neighborhood. Again, I'm bringing up complexities as I'm apt to do, so, but food for thought at a study session.
I think limiting the amount of food trucks in residential areas would be prudent to block parties or a special event a year or something like that in a location.
The other thing, and this is a internal policy, I don't believe it's actually specific to code, but if you are getting a block party permit, you're required to have 75% of your neighbors within that block sign off on it. And so we could make the food truck part of that. You know, you have to make sure that you're being clear that a food truck's involved when you have that neighbor sign off.
Great.
To get into the details. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna parrot back what I've been hearing, just to make sure I'm gonna walk away
Oh,
tonight.
yeah, I'm sorry, I thought it sounded like you repeated back what we were talking about.
Oh, good. I'm gonna go through the whole list because, as I mentioned, I only got one nap in today. Oh, yeah.
So just one clarification on the last one. When it says on private property, that means on a specific private property or in the entire city of Ashland?
Thank you for that clarity. For on a specific tax lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thanks.
For food trucks in the right of way, we're comfortable allowing food trucks as long as it's a full street closure and full safety can be supported. Food trucks downtown, same application as the food trucks in the right of way, as long as it's a full street closure or on private property where there is full traffic control around the food truck. And then for proposed language caps on special events on specific private properties, having no cap at the moment, and seeing how that rolls out. And kind of do some self-regulation, self-monitoring for if we receive complaints about a specific event, to have that in our consideration when approving future events.
Great.
Okay? Great. Brandon, since you are a stronger code master, anything else that you think I should be asking before I walk away tonight?
We're fortunate that this will come back to the Planning Commission at a public hearing, and so I'm sure we'll get some input at that point. And we will draft an ordinance for the Chapter 18 amendments. The Planning Commission doesn't typically weigh in on Chapter 2 or Chapter 13 or other chapters, but I think the intention is to provide all of it as a package so that the body can know what changes are being made and how what was in the land use code is now consolidated into Chapter 2 under administration. So with that, I think this feedback is useful, and we'll be able to draft an ordinance in ordinance format showing strikeouts and bold ads. And if there's anything else that you guys would like us to bring back.
Oh, sorry, yes, please.
And again, apologies if this shows my overall ignorance of the food truck code as it sits today. No alcohol sales, or how is that addressed? And then secondly, how is setting up extraneous seating and so forth addressed or not?
Yeah, there is the section of land use code that relates to the more permanent establishment of food trucks that does have direct wording related to signage, seating, proximity to restrooms. I think the special event permit is a permit by permit assessment. So, if there are specific guidance that this group has, that a special event that has a food truck should have access to a restaurant or a restroom, those kind of things are triggered by Oregon Health Department. So we would review those as part of a special event permit, but it's not codified in the Chapter 2 as presented. So if there's recommendations that you should have table for seating and limitations on signage, that does complicate the issuance of the permit, but we could ask for that information up front from an applicant.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share as Brandon mentioned. For example, we just had a food truck that got a CUP, a permanent long-term food truck permit. They are able to serve alcohol because they have OLCC for beer and wine, but they went through the process in the code, which will not change, for having that permanent site and the ability, as part of OLCC's requirements, to then be able to serve beer and wine. For short-term special events, we have food trucks. We also have requirements for if you're going to serve beer and wine at your event. We then follow the OLCC requirements around that. So there is currently a pathway to making sure that that's done safely, but is also you're still able to do. And just so you guys know, we did just give a permit to an A Street block party happening on October 5th. It's the hot dogs and cold hops. So I think that's a great chance for you guys to come down and check out a special event in action. And it's the day after SO Pride, which is another special event permit that we just granted on the Saturday before. So check out two very different scaled special events that would both fall under this new chapter if it is voted into place.
And in your estimation, those checks and balances, you expect that they would work?
Yeah.
Even with loosening up the permitting process?
Yeah, so they still will be required to go through the city for any event for this. Both the police and the fire marshal, as well as our streets, our stormwater, wastewater group, and parks all review all those permits that come through, and then we document when violations occur so they can help make decisions in the future.
Does this, if all this goes into effect, which I assume it will, how does it impact your workflow, and are you prepared to deal with that?
Yeah. So I currently do oversee special event permits. We are piloting small changes of this internally. Where it will help is in codifying it and documenting it. It'll also support me in helping pass this on to somebody else
Okay.
once
Yeah.
that process is a little bit more square.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you thought about the communications plan for this? Because, many changes which are meant to be well-intended, the communications actually can derail them if not, handled well, with regard to the intent. So have you thought of, do you have a plan for that?
Yeah. So the biggest point of excitement that I will have if this goes into effect is that I will work to remove every single separate short-term event permit that's currently on our website and just have one link which leads you to the form for any type of event you want to have. We have that form built right now. We are using it for most major special events, but there's a lot of smaller events like plaza use, block party, etc. that aren't, that still have their own separate one. I will say most folks that come to my office for special events aren't aware of the specific of our code or policy. And so having that one-stop shop has been great to help educate, etc. We're not changing many of our internal policies with this code change. It's really just moving code around into one section and giving a little bit more leeway to administration to change the processes needed. So when it comes to communication plan, I don't think this one needs as huge of a communication plan rollout. I think it will organically roll, particularly because folks come to us a lot with event ideas, and it'll be really great to say to them, hey, yes, we can now do that food truck event in the alley in your neighborhood.
But I was thinking, for example, next door has a life of its own. And there are people who seem to spend their time trying to report on surreptitious activities that are going to destroy Ashland. Let me just say one that I happened to read today. But also, too, if you talk to the chamber, we don't want the restaurants to get all in an uproar because some of these protections are there to protect them, right? So just having been around a lot of initiatives that were well-intended, but, the story got ahead of the action.
Got it. No, thank you, and I apologize. I misunderstood what you meant by communication plan.
Yeah.
When the code language gets to the point where we're ready to come to Planning Commission as a public hearing, I will send an email out to the chamber. The chamber is great at putting things in their newsletter to let folks know what's going on. And then I have an email list myself for everyone who's received an event or requested an event that I'll send out to as well. I will say that is one blessing about changes to land use code. There is a much longer runway than with city council, so we'll have the time to let folks know ahead of time exactly the date and time for that hearing.
I'd also note that some of these changes were precipitated with conversations with the Chamber's downtown committee initially. So they were, part of the history of coming forward with changes in order to look at things like the sidewalk sales and special events. So I know that they'll be receptive to finding out, how the city might want to proceed in participating on that.
Because it seems there's a lot of goodness, as came out early in the discussion, that could happen with this. And as Ashland economically rejuvenates, as it seems to be doing in some, to a major extent, we're all happy to see. But, the understanding could get ahead of the communications pretty easily in this day and age. So I hope that doesn't happen. It sounds like you have a good plan to prevent that.
Yeah, learn as we go.
I'm not sure if this is for you or for Brandon, but when I was reading through this, I got all in a tizzy because I didn't see the appeal process possibility until later. I think it'd be good to refer to it where it says that they can be denied, to just say there is an appeal process.
Okay, great.
So that somebody else doesn't read it and not keep reading.
Yeah, and that is a new provision that under existing short-term events, if the city were to deny one, there's not an appeal process. So
I understand,
It's
but
good.
it's just,
I appreciate that.
you know,
Okay.
if it raised my hackles and I don't want a permit, it'd be good to.
Fair enough.
No, fair. And just to give you a sense of timing, since this is, if I'm going the right way, would be a change to Title 18. We will likely come back before you all February, March timeline, with the goal of having it in place by July 1 next year, which is when we ramp up on our events.
Great.
So hope to have it in place by then, if that is the will of the commission and the council.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody have anything else?
Brandon, what time was the meeting tomorrow for the tennis? 5:30?
Yeah, that is at 5:30 at the Ashland Senior Center, 1699 Holmes Avenue.
Hosted by Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's good work. I guess, anybody want to move to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Done.
To Chair